Thank you for joining us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. Transportation is the highest emitting sector in the world. It is responsible for 24% of direct carbon dioxide emissions from fuel combustion. The reality is the transport sector is in a critical transition. As we say, there is a need to develop and adapt technologies that can reduce dependence on oil and emissions of greenhouse gases. And the fact is, more people are changing. The electric car deployment has been growing rapidly over the past 10 years. There are 10 million electric cars on the world's roads at the end of 2020, following a decade of rapid growth. So today, we look at some of the efforts to move the transition forward and what can cause its delay. Do stay with us. Michigan, long recognized as the historic heart of the American automobile industry, with Detroit known as the car capital of the world. The state automobile industry provided the model for mass production that other industries later adopted. Of the estimated 1.4 billion vehicles on the road across the world, about 280 million vehicles are operating on roads throughout the United States. Majority of them account for nearly 3/4 of transport carbon dioxide emissions. With a call for more clean energy transition, many believe the transport sector needs to develop clean technologies. And more often than not, attention is on what is going on here in Michigan, as a home to 96 of the top 100 automobile suppliers to North America. The sector contributes $225 billion annually to the state's economy, providing or supporting 712,000 jobs here.
We're very much into growing our industry here, but we're also very much into making sure that mobility can impact every community around the state. So we don't think the two are competitive. We don't think the two are separate. To grow your industry and to create communities we all need to be a part of or want to be a part of, economies we all want to be a part of, it all fits together. It's all blended as it relates to the future of transportation. That's kind of how we look at things.
The state's Office of Future Mobility and Electrification is a recognition of the changing landscape for automotive manufacturing and the need for a comprehensive statewide approach to help government, education, and the private sector succeed in an evolving mobility industry. The office aims to build on and expand the current successes of the state's mobility initiatives, including the Michigan Department of Transport's ongoing work with automotive industry partners in developing smart infrastructure.
The Office of Future Mobility and Electrification is actually new to state government. It was launched last summer along with the Council on Future Mobility and Electrification. The office and the council are meant to be dedicated resources because the next 10 years are going to be a landmark decade for mobility. Electric vehicles are expected to pass internal combustion engine vehicle sales around 2030. Software will represent more than 50% of the value of a vehicle by 2030. I mean, you're probably still going to drive your car by 2030, but there's a good chance it'll park itself, navigate a construction zone by itself, or drive on the highway by itself. So there are a lot of hard policy questions and a lot of really exciting public-private partnership opportunities that the state needs sort of a team that's 24/7 thinking about this stuff. And that's what the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification was meant to do. And we operate under this vision that a stronger state economy can truly be achieved through safer, more equitable, and environmentally sound transportation for all residents.
And there is nowhere this is more evident in the state than the expanding Detroit Innovation District, an initiative to help transform 4.4 square miles of Detroit into a vibrant place with access to a microgrid, smart home, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and an alternative fuels platform. Here, Next Energy, with its partners, is showcasing what can be achieved with an upgrade in transportation infrastructure.
Our mission is to accelerate clean, smart, and accessible solutions for communities and cities. And we do that through, kind of two main applications or sectors. One is mobility, Can we commercialize and bring new solutions to the market that allow us to move from point A to point B more efficiently and cleaner? And then on the grid side of things, how are we cleaning and how are we creating new solutions that are going to make our homes and buildings more efficient and the way that we generate and distribute energy to those homes and buildings more efficient? So and actually with electric vehicles, they go hand in hand. The vehicles are connected, the energy flows from anywhere there's an outlet, and it's that smarter, that connectivity kind of brings it all together. So how we can optimize and manage the use of all those applications and technologies.
So how will the electric vehicle infrastructure support the developing fleet, many have asked? Today's automobile culture is supported by an estimated 135,000 outlets with some 1.4 million pumps in the United States. That's according to the National Petroleum News. The network balances the competing demands of low cost and efficiency, locational convenience and capacity utilization. The result is that most motorists in most situations can easily find a competitively priced petrol station and not wait in line for an open pump. Many expect similar dynamics will shape the emerging network of electric vehicle charging stations.
I think when we're looking at alternative fuels in particular, we need to be thinking about sort of where the market has either failed or needs to be corrected in some way, shape, or form. And the good news about alternative fuels, in particular electrification, is a lot of this is just consumer awareness too, right? Just ensuring that folks understand the fuel savings that can accrue. I think we have to be realistic too. It's not just education. There have to be federal prompts, which is why we're considering, discretionary grants, formula funds, so that public actors don't have to choose between, structurally deficient bridges and funding crucial, charging infrastructure deployment. So that's why the American Jobs Plan is so robust and provides and really affords both, folks at the state level and local level to think about investments that will improve and solve for our mitigation activities across the board, whether it's for alternative fuels, whether it's for more active transportation, whether it's for sustainable aviation fuels, and whether it's to address, a lot of the egregious climate pollution that afflicts ports, which is particularly important for our environmental justice communities that are adjacent and are so-called, frontline or minoritized that have been neglected, for far too long. So equity is going to be part and parcel of everything that we do, including our climate investments, in most particularly our climate investments.
The International Energy Agency says existing measures to increase efficiency and reduce energy demand must be deepened and extended for compliance with the Sustainable Development Scenario. This process, the agency says, should be set in motion in the upcoming decade, as any delay would require that stricter measures be taken beyond 2030, which could noticeably raise the cost of reaching climate targets. Combined effort across all transport modes, accompanied by power sector decarbonization, will be crucial to achieving the Sustainable Development Scenario goals.
The Department of Transportation recently put out some guidance to clarify where there are opportunities to site renewable energy projects on transportation rights-of-way, including on highway rights-of-way, so that we use, our existing assets instead of kind of for the best transportation use, for the highest and best use, right? We want to reduce emissions to the greatest extent possible, but we also want to reduce waste to the greatest extent possible as well. So hopefully, as kind of a topper, that's a helpful construct for folks to think about our North Star net zero emissions by 2050, how are we thinking about creating options to reduce trips, shift trips, improve? And obviously, all of that has to be, undergirded with a strong performance management regime.
There are reports that the United States' #1 automaker, General Motors, has committed to boosting global spending on electric and autonomous vehicles to $35 billion through 2025, a 30% jump over its most recent forecast as it pursues electric vehicle leadership. The company has said earlier that it supports overall emissions reductions in California's 2019 deal with other major automakers. It has also sought more flexibility to hit carbon reduction targets.
So General Motors is committed to being carbon neutral in our manufacturing facilities by 2040. And we're demonstrating that right here at Orion Assembly by utilizing methane from our landfill gas. We have 2 landfills that are adjacent to our 430-acre property. And we actually pipe that methane into a cogen generator, and we're able to reclaim that energy. And about half of our energy to sustain the facility is from that landfill gas. In addition to that, we have a 350 kilowatt solar array on our property, which we utilize to provide energy to the grid in our neighboring homes in our town. So the team is really working aggressively to deploy technologies like that across the globe, renewable energies, and then looking to identify ways that we can recycle and reuse any of the waste that we have that are coming from our facilities. So 2040 is the target, and we're working aggressively to get there.
Reports say electric vehicles in the United States over the past year, even in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, is encouraging. From the first quarter of 2020 to the first quarter of this year, electric vehicle sales jumped nearly 45%, and sales from this January through March reached nearly 100,000, a record for one quarter. So far, this year's sales are outpacing 2020's total electric vehicle sales of 252,548. That said, its sales were less than 2% of all U.S. vehicle sales last year. In May, President Joe Biden made the case for his $174 billion electric vehicle plan, calling for government grants for new battery production facilities during a visit to a Ford Motor electric vehicle plant in Michigan. Mr. Biden argues the United States is falling behind China, which is selling more electric vehicles.
Folks, the rest of the world is moving fast. They're moving ahead. They're not waiting for the United States of America. Government, labor, industry working together have to step up. And we have a playbook that'll work.
He has ruled out consumer incentives for high-priced electric luxury models, according to a White House fact sheet, as he argues for dramatic government spending to prod Americans to buy electric vehicles at a preview of Ford's new EV version of its best-selling F-150 pickup truck.
It's not that China's battery technology is that much more innovative than anyone else's. Remember, our national labs in the United States, our universities, our automakers led in the development of this technology. But today, China has a bigger manufacturing scale than all other countries. And they're using that scale to make these batteries not just in China, but they're making them in Germany and in Mexico. And they're now exporting those electric vehicles around the world with sites on the American market. And they think they're going to win. But I got news for them. They will not win this race. We can't let them. We have to move fast, and that's what you're doing here.
Mr. Biden's electric vehicle plan, first announced on the 31st of March, cheered investors who bought shares in several electric vehicle startups that have struggled of late. During his last visit to Michigan, Mr. Biden was pushing for electric vehicles in the auto industry's heartland and was trying to win over Auto workers worried that more electric cars and trucks will mean fewer jobs. The White House wants to encourage new battery production facilities, which are key to ramping up U.S. electric vehicle manufacturing.
And this is the ED40 stator.
Electric car registrations increased by 41% in 2020, despite the pandemic-related worldwide downturn in car sales, in which global car sales dropped 16%. Around 3 million electric cars were sold globally, a 4.6% sales share. And Europe overtook the People's Republic of China as the world's largest electric vehicle market for the first time. Electric bus and truck registrations also expanded in major markets, reaching global stocks of 600,000 and 31,000 respectively.
We firmly believe that electric vehicles is the future, which is why we're making these massive investments. Like I said, $27 billion just in the next 5 years. So the industry is transforming. It's definitely at this pivot point, but it will take a few years, obviously. So while we are rolling out all of these new vehicles, while we're moving towards those 30 new electric vehicles in the next 5 years, we're still making a lot of internal combustion engines, a lot of ICE vehicles. And we continue to make very good profit, for example, on our full-size trucks and SUVs. And in fact, it's those profits that are made in those the traditional portfolio, that is where we're able to make those investments into the future. So it's not a move that we make from one day to the next. We still need to be a profitable company, Krista, exactly as you said. But we can't be behind the curve. We want to be ahead of the curve. So we're still making very high quality, extremely in demand vehicles. And we will continue those for some years to come. But we'll hit our carbon neutrality goals, and we will also we'll be well positioned for EVs across all the categories and autonomous vehicles too.
There are 3 major levels of chargers available for electric vehicles. The standard 120-volt plug, often used for home appliances, charges slowly but can fill a battery to near full capacity with several nights charge, or about 20 to 40 hours. The 240-volt level 2 chargers generally provide 20 to 25 miles of charge in an hour, which shortens charging time to 8 hours or less. Finally, level 3 direct current fast chargers can charge a battery up to 80% in 30 minutes. Currently, level 2 chargers are the most widely available in the United States. Charging time and charger compatibility are some of the major problems users of electric vehicles have today.
So we're helping Delta Electronics with the testing of this new charging station. This station can charge an electric vehicle in 10 minutes. So you could charge 6 an hour in that manner, but it can provide 180 miles of driving range.
Rather than being refueled at a typical gas station, electric vehicles must be charged at electrical outlets in order to run. Many EV owners charge their cars at home in their garage using a special wall-mounted charger. This arrangement works for most people because the average person drives 29 miles per day. This distance is well within the range of today's electric vehicles, most of which can travel between 150 and 250 miles on a charge, depending on the model. But for those on long trip, charging remains a major headache.
So within the big 3, in that project where I talked about with Delta Electronics and their 400 kilowatt charger, one of the things that we do not have right now is vehicles that can charge at 400 kilowatts. And so General Motors is providing and developing the vehicle and the vehicle battery and system that can charge, that can accept that level of charge. And one of the great things about charging at that rate is that that vehicle charger will provide 180 miles of driving range in 10 minutes. And so now we start to compete with the gas station experience, and that really makes long range or interstate travel much more convenient. So another project that we worked on with the vehicle OEMs is At that time, it was Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, now Stellantis. We did a 2-year project with them to develop and understand the value of vehicle-to-grid technology. So vehicle-to-grid technology with an electric vehicle is, not only do we charge the vehicle battery when you plug it in, but the vehicles could be configured in a certain way to where you could draw the energy out of the vehicle battery and use it to power your home or power a certain portion of the building. You might have seen where in Texas in the storms over the wintertime, when the grid went out, the people that were fortunate enough to have Ford F-150 hybrid vehicles, they had exportable power. And so they were actually able to plug their house into their truck. This was an early development of that. And we showed how vehicles could power a home in our test house here that we have on campus, and what it would mean to a fleet, a fleet of vehicles that would be within one specific company or one specific building. And that was a great example. And we did that a few years ago, and now pretty much every vehicle manufacturer has a V2G or vehicle-to-grid development program in place.
Trading out a national fleet of gasoline-powered cars and trucks for a fleet of EVs means that millions of people will depend on the electric grid in new ways. Therefore, power generation capacity will need to increase to accommodate these vehicles without straining the grid. Expert assessments vary on how much electricity demand will increase with widespread EV use. The Department of Energy predicts a 38% increase in electricity consumption by 2050, mostly due to a high penetration of electric vehicles.
Things I think that occur to me in terms of hitting our net zero emissions by 2050 targets are, obviously reducing trips, shifting trips, and improving trips. And that doesn't include every single last way to get to net zero, and we'll talk about some additional ways. But just in terms of bucketing kind of where we need to put emphasis on, we've been thinking of, options for reducing trips, right? So we don't necessarily want to force folks out of their car, but we want to provide as many options as possible for there to be accessibility, so that folks have improved bicycle infrastructure, improved pedestrian infrastructure, more complete streets. So those are some examples of reducing trips. We're thinking earnestly about shifting trips, and part of that reflects the idea, not that it's a nice to have, but that it solves for equity. It solves for a lot of our climate and economic challenges if people have other options than just using cars. So we want to provide options for transit. We want to provide options for rail and other, less carbon intensive forms of transportation. And then there's also, in addition to reducing and shifting trips, improving trips as well, right? And so for better or worse, we have the transportation system that we have, and we want to look at opportunities to improve the current transportation system, right? And so that includes things like transportation electrification. It includes things like road pricing strategies. It includes things like better land use, which is really a symptom of what ails us insofar as the transportation system is concerned.
Experts say electric vehicles have great potential to draw down carbon emissions if widely adopted. Electric vehicle sales are increasing at a rapid rate. But meaningful emissions mitigation through mainstream EV adoption is inhibited by many complex technological, economic, and behavioral problems and trade-offs, and policy responses are needed to address these challenges. Vehicle manufacturers announce increasingly ambitious electrification plans. Out of the world's top 20 vehicle manufacturers, which represented around 90% of new car registration in 2020, 18 have stated plans to widen their portfolio of models and to rapidly scale up the production of light-duty electric vehicles. The message is clear. Many more people are rejecting polluting fossil fuel, and that is a warning for policymakers here in Nigeria. I'm Ayola Kasim, asking you to join us next week for another episode of Earthfile. From all of us here in Lagos, it's bye for now.